All right, it looks like we have a full, well, there still might be people coming in, but we have a pretty full room now. So let's get started here. I just wanted to go over a few things. Just wanted to say welcome to everyone. This is our third day of the 16th annual Women's Policy Leadership Institute put on by Montana Women Vote. Montana Women Vote works statewide to engage low-income and Indigenous women and families, LGBTQ folks, Two-Spirit and non-binary folks, Black, Indigenous, and other Montanans of color in the democratic process as informed voters, policy advocates, and community leaders. We hope that the information that we have for you today will help your efforts in your community, and we look forward to staying connected with you as we work together to advance state policy that works for low-income folks in Montana. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few technical things just so that everybody can get the most out of this experience. So this is a meeting style, but you will be muted automatically except for the panelists. We will have time for questions at the end of the panel, and at that time you can unmute yourself by clicking the microphone in the bottom left corner. If you're using the phone, you can unmute yourself by pressing *6. And we love to see people share their questions and comments in the chat feature, which will be down at the bottom of your screen. You'll also see down there a Q&A button, and you can submit any questions for the panel in that box. You also have the option to turn closed captioning on and off and adjust the size of your captions by clicking the arrow by the CC button down at the bottom of the screen. If you have questions or technical difficulties, you can put them in the chat, or you can call our staff at 406-317-1505. Just wanted to let everybody know we'll be recording today's session. So if you missed something, you can check out our website for the video. It might take a bit to get up there, but we will have that up soon on the website. And we're going to share a feedback form at the end of the workshop that you can fill out for a chance to win a Visa gift card or a signed copy of What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat by our keynote speaker, Aubrey Gordon. I don't know how many people were there at her talk last night, but it was pretty great, and that is a very exciting gift. And yeah, so my name is Destiny Vale. I go by she, her pronouns, and I'm an organizer at Montana Women Vote. I'll be moderating today's session. Today we're going to talk about climate change, and especially how climate change affects people who don't often get brought up in the conversation as far as like conventional environmentalism and climate change work goes. That is people of color, Black and Indigenous people of color, and also people who are living on a low income or living in poverty. There's a lot of effects of climate change that affect low income people directly when it comes to like the cost of food, because farming becomes harder to do. It becomes harder to get yields, especially we might know that living here in Montana, going through a drought, you're not going to get as much wheat, for example, which makes the cost of bread go up, which is a basic staple, things like that. We also have tribal nations in this state whose lands have seen direct impact by climate change. Personally, I'm from Browning, which is on the Blackfeet Nation, and we're right next to Glacier Park. And you can see the difference in the glaciers. Glacier National Park is used as an example all over the world for what climate change can do, like a visual example. And all you have to do is look up at the mountains and you can see a difference. When I was a kid, the mountains had white on them all year round. This year, my mom was even just speaking almost like in a scared way about it, like the mountains were completely free of any white marks. There was nothing on them. And so that's just a few examples of how climate change affects us. But I am most excited to hear from our panelists. We have a lot of great people here on our panel today. All of them have done exciting things, and I'm really excited to hear from them. And I am going to turn it over to them to introduce themselves, and we will start with Angeline Cheek.
Keep getting these pop-ups, admit. So I'm trying to keep up here. Hopefully it's okay. But could you hear me okay? I just want to make sure. Okay, so I want to start off. Good afternoon, everybody. Hamidakiapi, Chante Washte Napechi Uzapi, my relatives. I greet you with a heartfelt handshake, and that's how Lakotas introduce themselves. My government name is Angeline Cheek, and my Lakota name is Date Skawashtewi, which means white wind, good woman. I'm Lakota Dakota of the Fort Peck, Assiniboine and Sioux tribes in northeastern Montana. My pronouns are she, her, hers, and I am the Indigenous Justice Organizer for the ACLU of Montana. I have coordinated many events over the years, raising awareness on various Indigenous issues. The events I have organized over the years are numerous: prayer walks, awareness walks, runs, rallies, informational workshops, numerous community meetings with youth and elders, peaceful protests, know your rights trainings, legal observing trainings. It's been an honor to be a part of this roundtable discussion with awesome people on the climate inequity in Montana through the 16th annual Women's Policy Leadership Institute. Hamidakiapi, Pilamiaye. Thank you all.
All right, thank you, Angeline, for that introduction. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mike Durglow.
Thanks, Destiny, and thanks for inviting me. Good to see you, Termaine. I haven't seen you forever. Seems like a couple of years at least, huh? Yeah, my name is actually Heskalha Pesia. That's a Swisam Hes Louis Quex. Kisu Cookie Klausla. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Standing Grizzly Bear. My Suyapi name or my English name is Mike Durglow, and I'm the department head for the Tribal Historic Preservation Department for Confederated Salish Tribe, and also the chair of the Climate Change Advisory Committee for ever since we started, right, Termaine? Good to see you.
Thank you so much for being here. Can we move to Leo John Bird?
Okay, Nixukoaxki, itas kinematak, Nistuni Doniku Pitoch Suatis, Ni Dunk Pa mi Sinski Sitchta, Nixista Anastaya ain't Yaki, Nina Anastayak Sixigami Ochkidopi. Hello, everyone. I welcome you all into who I am. My name is Pitoch Suatis. In Napi Buchsen or English, you can call me Leo John Bird. I am a senior community health specialist with equity and anti-racism at Partnership Health Center. And I am also a master's of public health student at the University of Montana. I use he, him, and they, them pronouns. I come by way to you from Badger Creek on the Blackfeet Nation, and I'm also from the Haida and Tlingit peoples in Alaska. And I welcome you into this discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you so much, LJ. Termaine, yeah, you can go.
Hello, everyone. Okay, hi, Mike. It's been forever. Nice to meet everyone, see everyone's faces. Gosh, COVID put us really in a different presentation era, right? And so, okay, nistuni danaku awanaki nixis danasta astanski ginstanasta bitoasta. Hello and welcome. I go by the pronouns he, her, hers, and my English name is Termaine Edmo, and my Blackfeet name is Rattle women. My parents are George and Melinda Kipp, who in our tradition, we always rate where we're from and who our parents are from to determine our band, clan, so forth. And so I'm just ecstatic about this presentation. It's been a long time coming since we got to talk climate talk, right, Mike? And so finally getting put out to the table is really something. So I'm looking forward to the conversation. Thank you for having us.
Well, thank you all for being here and for introducing yourselves. That introduction went way faster than I expected, but I guess that gives us more time for the questions. And if you want to learn more about our panelists, you can go to our website to read some bios, and we'll drop some links for all the work that people are doing. So I guess with that, we'll just go into our first question. And this one
Hey, Justin,
is, oh,
well,
go ahead.
in the bios, it has my name as Dirt Low.
Oh, I'm sorry. We will, we will change
It
that.
could be Dirt Low, but I don't know.
No. Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, we'll change that right away. So hopefully everybody can take note of that. Yeah, well, with that being said, so we kind of have an idea maybe of where climate change is coming from, but with this first question, I'm just gonna put it right out there, not, you know, not beat around the bush, I guess. So we're just wondering, how do capitalism and colonialism interfere with efforts to mitigate the current climate crisis? And kind of a follow-up, does this have more of an effect on POC people and people who have low financial resources? And everybody can answer this, but we can start out with Angeline.
Good morning. Good afternoon again. So some of the things that I put into thought and mind was the definition of colonialism is the policy or the practice of acquiring full or partial political control over another country, occupying it with settlers and exploiting it economically. In my opinion, colonialism has a different meaning to Indigenous folks. It's more of a violent term because we've experienced genocide, forced assimilation, oppression, not just exploiting our natural resources. And everybody has their own interpretation, but that's just my interpretation of the term colonialism. There is more to that term than just exploitation of resources or occupying a country. But capitalism and climate change are destroying the earth. Companies are aggressively pursuing profits to enrich themselves by destroying natural resources. The climate crisis stems from overproduction of coal mining, uranium mining, and gas lines, and oil pipelines. Natural resources and herbal medicines utilized by Indigenous people are being destroyed or poisoned by these companies. Purpose of capitalism and colonialism is putting profit over people. An example would be my personal experience of bringing awareness to the detrimental impact of Trans-Canada KXL pipeline. BIPOC communities or communities of financial burden are forced to have production of coal mining, uranium mining, the gas lines that they've been putting in, and oil pipelines placed on their homelands or backyards. Then there is opposition of these productions by community advocates to fight in the courts or organizing events to bring more awareness by building power through networking, finding more allies to help with the cause. If KXL pipeline went through, it would have impacted the safety of my community with more increased crime rates around drug, human trafficking, abductions, including more cases of MMIW. Our medicines, which include cancer, heart, traditional tobacco, also sage, washdemina, cedar, those are also considered medicines as well. It took a lot of work and started with prayer walks, awareness walks, rallies, informational workshops, and numerous community meetings. through organizing all of these events, I started to get involved with other movements where people were working on the same cause I was advocating for, or other movements. But the same situation, such as like with uranium mining in Pine Ridge, you know, just supporting the awareness walks that were happening. I've always been in the background of KXL when it very first started out, because I was a college student in South Dakota going to Black Hills State University, where this person who wanted to remain anonymous came to the Ocheti Shakoan Treaty meeting. That's a traditional where the chiefs and the elders meet up in the Lakota way, and gave information on the devastation of KXL pipeline. This guy came from Canada and he kind of had a mask and didn't want to show himself, but he gave information on KXL, like the damages that occurred in Canada, and then just kind of sent a warning down here to us on this side of the border. So when I attended that meeting, after the guy gave the presentation on the devastation of KXL pipeline, would cause the communities along the Missouri River to start organizing, where I attended the first Iwepi ceremony conducted by Chief Leonard Kodog, sponsored by Paula Antoine, Sichangu Land Office Director. We followed advice from ceremony and had victory. Then soon as Trump became president, the KXL pipeline was revitalized. And in ceremony, what they told us was just to be prayerful. We took the paperwork into ceremony with us, and we followed the advice that was given in those ceremonies. And then that's kind of like what we followed. And then just with the spirit camp that was made in Rosebud, I ended up moving back to Fort Peck. And first week I was back here, there was a white van in my hometown trying to forcibly pick up students after school. The only thing the community did was post a warning on Facebook and waited 3 hours for law enforcement to show up. Then I realized that our community was experiencing the impact of the Bakken oil field because of the many man camps and heavy drugs that came into our communities on the Fort Peck reservation. Then to have KXL oil pipeline on the other side of the reservation didn't make sense, because our communities would have diminished due to the thousands of workers that would have been placed onto the man camps. Around that time, I was invited to Canada to the Indigenous Voices Rising event organized by Ariel DeRanger. I don't know how to pronounce their names correctly, so forgive me, and Melissa LeBlanco. I took a youth from our community to Canada, and my experience up in Canada was really an eye-opener, because hearing from some of the elders up there, they talked about how they can't even use their traditional medicines. They can't make no traditional foods or prepare anything for their ceremonies. They have to buy it in the stores if they could find it. And you know, they cried when they talked about how it was growing up when there was no oil crossing through their lands. And they fed us the traditional meal, and then they caught 80 fish, and then out of the 80, there was 50 of them that they had to throw back into the river due to the cancer tumors in the fish. So after that, it was really a serious eye opener. And you know, because a lot of people here on my reservation, we hunt and fish to provide, you know, to put food on a table, so you don't have to be in the stores all the time purchasing meat and all that. But you know, it's, as Indigenous people, we all face the same struggles, and you know, we rely on hunting and fishing. So it was just sad to see that how broken the community was in Canada. And then to see even their traditional birds, I think in the Lakota way, the eagles are very sacred to us, but their traditional bird, I think, was like the raven or the hawk. And the tailing ponds of the oil pipeline caused the birds to die. I guess they rescued them, and then they tried to save their sacred birds, but then they just couldn't, because even though they would clean the birds out, they would eventually die anyway. So, I mean, it was just really sad to see. And then like the choke cherries, the blueberries, all of those things they couldn't pick, the strawberries. And to look at the sacred sites and the destruction of it, they just, you know, TransCanada just plowed right through it. And, you know, even the smell I could remember when I toured the tar sands in Canada too was, I just had this severe headache for 2 days. And there's a huge turnover rate of workers, what I found out when I was in Canada, due to the chemicals and getting sick, and people just couldn't work long enough. So there's just a high turnover rate of workers. That's what I found out in Canada. So this definitely would impact BIPOC people and low income areas, because we utilize, like I said before, the medicines, and then also the water for our traditional ceremonies. Most of our tribes, we utilize water for ceremonies, even having water ceremony, and then hunting like deer, the buffalo, the elk, the moose for food. Some people rely on hunting, like again, and if the land is poisoned, if the land and the water are poisoned, we're just going to end up like Canada too, with a lot of animals that have the tumors, the cancer, as it is already. This year, there were about, I would say approximately 100 deer that were contaminated. The meat was not good, so we had to throw it away. And that's coming from the Fort Peck Fish and Game Wildlife. I did find that out, and I don't know what's causing it. Well, we all know climate change, but but yeah, so I mean, it's pretty sad times. So
That's
after
true. Oh, go.
after coming back from Canada, I started to organize numerous events where I became a grassroots advocate for a very long time. And then a few months later, I started to work for the ACLU of Montana, where we FOIA'd the documents from the state, Montana State, on KXL surveillance of protesters. Protectors is what we call ourselves. But the only information I can disclose about that is what's in the articles, and the state officials with law enforcement were very much prepared to use excessive force against any protests that would occur. I do know that Morton County, the same county that was in Standing Rock, came over here to give Montana Highway Patrol training on excessive force if there were a protest to occur. And that's pretty much all I have for now. I could go on and on. I mean, there's just so much to talk about, but again, time.
Yeah, I'm sure we would all love to hear more, and we've got a whole hour, so we can talk about as much as we want.
Chiming in here on piggybacking off Angeline. Nice to meet you, by the way. So it's called chronic wasting disease. That is what climate change is affecting in our deer and what we're seeing. And we're seeing here on the Blackfeet Nation. So we were luckily enough to get a small chunk of funding to actually have these deer tested. And so we partnered. And again, I mean, it's getting creative with our partnerships. It's getting education and awareness out to our community of what's really happening on the ground, right? And so some of our avid hunters don't even know what chronic wasting disease is. Some of them just are like, hey, what's that? Like, what the heck's going on? And they don't really know that these tumors, what they look like, are identifying. They just know that they're seeing something different. So really educating our people and educating the community on, some of their only survival rates, is wildlife and fishing. And so the chronic wasting disease is viable up for 2 years. And that is just scary because we have limited testing. They're still identifying tests to come out so we can actually test our wildlife, our water, and we can really start getting a monitoring station. So we're heading that up slowly, but I mean, again, I know your people down Milk River that is where we found it, and so that is really a prominent watershed that we want to keep an eye on, and having this dialogue between all the tribes actually is needed.
Thanks for that, Tremaine. Mike, you raised your hand. I'm gonna suggest something real quick. I don't know how everybody feels about this, but it would be nice to have more of a discussion. So I'm wondering if all of you just want to unmute, maybe go back and forth for the questions, if that works for you. And you can just respond to each other. Maybe
Sure.
We'll just see how it works.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Mike.
Well, that was awesome, Angeline. Very great. And there's not much I could add to it except that I've been doing some work with ITEP, the Institute for Tribal Environmental Professionals, and we put on a workshop up in Alaska. And a lot of the folks that came to that workshop, it's tribal, so Alaska villages. A lot of the folks were seeing personally the impacts of the tar sands and the pipeline, and they said that all of the fallout from the refineries is actually impacting caribou routes because it kills the lichen along their traditional routes. So they're having to go find other routes and food sources up there. So that's impacting the villages and the tribal people up in Canada or Alaska. That's all.
To kind of go off of everybody's point as well, from a public health perspective, a lot of what we study is epidemiology, the spread and incidence of disease. And there isn't a single disease or health metric out there that doesn't negatively and inequitably impact Black, Brown, and Indigenous folks and sexual minorities. And then to speak about what it's doing to our animal relatives as well. There are whale migration patterns that have been affected by climate change. There are salmon spawning places where you could literally teach communities a calendar based off of spawning sites in Haida and Tlingit communities. And then now we're starting to see that those spawning sites are changing due to hyperacidity of the water. So there is a lot occurring, and it's there. I think the point that we all are trying to get across is that we need to start centering Black, Brown, Indigenous voices because we are invisibilized, I think, in this climate change narrative.
Thanks for that, Leo John. You kind of went into the next questions. I guess I'll just state it out loud, but we're already kind of talking about it. So just wondering, what are the health effects of climate change on Black and Indigenous and other people of color? Also just wondering in there, you know, I forgot to clarify at the beginning here, but I really wanted to make a point. This is about both BIPOC communities and low income communities. However, I just wanted to make sure we know that we're not like conflating the two. Like being low income is not a part of like Indigenous culture or Black culture or anything of that. Sometimes just because of the power structures that, you know, those two communities might overlap. But I just wanted to make that point, but also, yeah, you're kind of already talking about it, but what are some of the other health effects for those communities?
Yeah, so I have a little bit of a prepared statement for that piece. So bear with me on that for like the first 5 or so minutes. And then I kind of want to go off on a monologue about language, and then we'll kind of open it up to the rest of the panel. So I am gonna read a little bit from my prepared statement. So first, I think it's important for us to look at some statistics. More than half of the people who live near hazardous waste sites are people of color. Toxic waste, including air pollution, accounts for higher pulmonary afflictions, including asthma and emphysema, and for higher rates of all types of cancer. In a lot of the statistics and epidemiological reports that I looked at, it's higher rates of lung cancer and impaired kidney function that have been at the forefront, I think, of those reports. So although, as Angeline and others were stating, there's higher accounts of tumors, of autoimmune diseases. If you look in your own family histories of diseases, you could probably point out a lot of others that I think aren't going to be mentioned here. There is a direct correlation between the negative health metrics faced by people of color and their proximity to toxic waste. It's actually really interesting if you take a look at the map of low-income communities in the United States and overlay it with a map of all toxic and hazardous waste sites, you will see a direct correlation. And colonialism, colonization, capitalism is to blame for all of that. Moreover, natural disasters such as flood and wildfires disproportionately affect people of color. When mostly white communities face a natural disaster, the aid that comes from government entities tends to increase the wealth in the community. So white families living in an area with about $10 billion worth in damages saw a wealth increase of nearly $126,000 versus Black families saw a decrease of about $27,000. When we consider environmental justice or injustice, we need to look no further than the Flint, Michigan water crisis and abandoned uranium mines on the Navajo Nation. It took the federal government 2 years to respond to the Flint crisis, only after numerous lawsuits were filed from people in that community and activism asking for lead levels to be checked. People in the community were literally traveling to the state capitol and to the national capitol with tanks of water on their back to show how toxic their own home community water was. On the Navajo Nation, there are over 500 abandoned uranium mines, paving the ways for homes and water sources to have elevated levels of uranium that elevate their risk and prevalence of lung and bone cancers and impaired kidney function. In Flint, Michigan, the lead levels of children were 3 times higher than what is seen as hazardous. And from a public health perspective, if you have 3 times parts per billion lead present in your blood, your entire life course is affected negatively. So to kind of bring that into a more of a Montana standard, a 2019 statewide survey of Montana public health and environmental health professionals asked about climate change concerns. Of the 222 responses, 89% accepted that global warming is occurring and 69% accepted human causation. Most of the health professionals surveyed felt that their own health was already being affected by climate change. 72% of the professionals felt that health departments should prepare to deal with the public and environmental health effects of climate change, although only 29% of the departments were currently doing so. So just a little bit of breaking that down, a lot of people in Montana are currently aware that climate change is happening and believe so. And a lot of our public health officials are stating that it already is impacting our health, yet we're not seeing a lot being done. The past few wildfire seasons that we've seen has had hazardous particulate matter in the air for over 7 months, and we received those informations about whether or not elders or youth should stay indoors during that time, but we're not really seeing a clear indication of data about what that is doing to elevating our risk for lung cancer, for asthma. And I think that is pretty telling as far as what is on our political agendas and why people kind of need to be more associated with that. So to kind of go on to a little bit more of my monologue, I want to talk about how we are invisibilized as Indigenous people in the center of this climate change discussion, and the knowledge that we have to share with the greater community, with everybody, with non-Indigenous folks as well. And that is centered around our languages and what we have to share. So I'm a student of Nitsipochsin. Along with a lot of my relatives, I learned our language at a very young age. And one of the principal differences that I noticed between Nitsipochsin and Napipochsin in English is how we treat nouns in our languages. So Nitsipochsin is a verb-based language, and we have animacy associated with our nouns. With some of our nouns, we have animate and inanimate objects, and that changes the adjectives that we associate with them. So if I want to say that chair is yellow, I say supatsis, utquenatsi. So the nutsi end of the color yellow is denoting the fact that supatis chair is an inanimate noun. And if I chose to say that that rock is yellow, I would say amo uchketok atquenam. So instead of saying utquenatsi as saying that the rock is inanimate, it's not alive, I say utquenam, that rock is alive. And in doing so, I'm applying a cultural value to what that rock means, but I'm also denoting the fact that that rock has a spirit. It has an association with it that is more than just what English, the noun-based language, does by naming things and not really providing an importance to it. So I only have about 45 seconds, but with that, I wanted to close by saying that there are indigenous peoples, the Maori people, the Klamath River folks in California, who have been able to pass resolutions that give their waterways, their rivers, the same protections as a human being would. And I think that's something that we as indigenous peoples can be at the forefront of the conversation of saying, our forests, our rocks, our mountains, our rivers, our animal species all have a spirit associated with them, and therefore they deserve the same protections that we're thinking about in this conversation of humans and humanity. So I'll close with that statement and give time for folks to kind of respond.
Yeah, that kind of goes into our next question too. But I did want to just give people a chance to respond about any like health, anything you've observed about like health effects of climate change in your communities or in your personal life.
Hey, Leo, I affirm everything that you said. But I wanted to know, are you busy on April 22nd? Hey, Gerald, how are you?
This is me. I'm not at my desk, but I'm here.
Anyway, we've got we're planning an Earth Day event at Salish Kootenai College on the 22nd. It'll be the first gathering.
22nd. You guys do yours on the 23rd.
I'll reach out to you, Mike, for sure.
It's really focused on human health and food sovereignty. So I think maybe Tremaine Gerald heard me talk about our river honoring. So down along Flathead River, we have a river honoring every year, and we bring in about, I don't know, a whole bunch of kids from surrounding schools down to the river for 2 days, and they go through these stations. And teepees, we set about 20 teepees up along the riverbank, and each teepee represents a station. That's kind of how I want to set this up. So we're distancing, we're outside, and we're moving through these stations in small groups. So 22nd, put it on your calendar. I'm going to get your email address because I'd like to invite you to join our CCAC Climate Change Advisory Committee if you want to. As Gerald and Tremaine know, once you are, though, you're a lifetime member and you can never leave.
That's the way we do in our communities, you know, in our societies. When we get in, we never, even when we transfer out, we're still grandparents to that society. So it's a lifetime commitment.
Sorry, Destiny, I got off on the side there.
You pass it
Oh,
on.
no, you're okay. I just wanted to take a moment to note that Gerald is the director of the Blackfeet Environmental Office. So thanks for making a cameo. Yeah, does anybody else have anything to add to the health question?
I do. Another experience I want to talk about too in Canada that you reminded me of was when I got to speak to some of the community members at Cold Lake territory. They were talking about too, like how the pregnant women, some of them there's a high number of miscarriages due to the water, and they can't even brush their teeth, like some of the water that's really contaminated from the oil and just the coal mining. I mean, just different stuff up there, different extractions. But I remember them talking about that too, and I kind of just wanted to add to that. But I really liked what you said on the health too.
One of the things that I wanted to share with you guys, I did a workshop over at Swinomish on the coast, and one of the people had, our medicines and our tribal foods are so important to our health, our spiritual health, our mental health, our physical health. We need those foods and those medicines. Whether it's bison or deer or elk or moose or husks or whatever those medicines are, we need those in our body. And there was a story that one of the people told at the Swinomish about his auntie. He said they went to a potlatch and he noticed his auntie was eating a whole bunch of clams really fast. And he's like, well, why, auntie, why are you doing that? He said, I know that they're going to make me sick, but this is my spirit food. So she was allergic to clams or shellfish, but she knew that, it's her spiritually, her spirit needed that, but she also knew that it was going to make her sick. So just the, real significance of our health, along with our language, Leo, and how important that is for us to, one of the things that our elders talked about, my dad especially, is about the high elevation medicinal plants and the concern that the elders have for those. So, Lemon.
Yeah, and just to throw you back out there, Mike, I would love it if you would tell them a little bit about the white bark pine and just what our wildlife big species need and why we're having more human conflict with this climate change of them coming down further into the communities. So maybe you can shed some light.
So that might lead off, Destiny?
Yeah, I guess if you
Or
want
is
me
that-
to ask the question officially.
Well, I don't know. I wanted to see if anybody else has anything to share about the importance and the significance of our foods and our medicines, and it makes us strong physically, but spiritually too. We need that.
I think that something that I have to add on the question of food sovereignty, or at least on the idea of principles of foods, is there is an important study that just came out about a cross-section of Haudenosaunee people that went to a traditional maize-based diet for 3 weeks. And in doing so, they had a community component to it where they would be connected with other community people who are involved in the traditional diet, as well as some of their elders. And they had a look at some traditional meals that they could eat and kind of created a menu from there. And from that study, there was a decrease. There was a decrease in weight and in body circumference, and there was also a decrease in overall A1C and hemoglobin A1C. And there was an overall decrease in, what is it called? In CT scan imaging of their liver sizes. And so I think that study can kind of help pave the way for conversations of our own peoples. For example, the Nitsitapi, the Blackfeet people, if we are to return to a traditional diet based off of the Ini, the buffalo, if we move back to there, what that could do to our A1Cs and what that could do for those of our people who are heavily afflicted by autoimmune diseases and diabetes.
And, just kind of throwing it back together on the topic of, low income people of Montana, which is me, us, the Blackfeet Nation. So we're in a food desert, we 50% of our land base is agricultural land. And if it's not a rancher, we only have a few farmers. And sadly, it's the Napiguan, making the bigger bank. But back to the food desert and food security, we have 2 grocery stores that, you can walk in and you can see the mold on there. The transportation from us to anywhere else is ridiculous. We have our winds picking up right now. We have sitting down east of us, we have 14 this morning driving in, 14 semis because they didn't want to hit that wind, because what happens, that's all of our supplies, all of our food, all of our staples that we need as people to keep us going. And it's sitting there, not able to get to us from the spatial injustice where we're put, right? The reservation where we're at. And we're really put, well, luckily for us Blackfeet, we're put on our ancestral lands, but still at the same time, we're still having to fight the damage already done. And educating our people is what is the most prominent deal for us right now. And again, with COVID and those numbers taking out our people as well, you can see how we have to travel at least 25 to 45 miles from 7 outlying communities to get to the main town of Browning for our food, for our gas, for our aid, for the hospital, right? And so we lose members we lose wildlife, we lose our four-legged animals, who are just like family, who offset our cost of living with the ranchers. And we're really seeing this devastation by the spatial injustice of where we're at. And that's how it's affecting our health.
Tell Gerald to give me some of that bison and I'll bring over some salmon.
Yes.
I just traded a bunch of bison for salmon with the Colvilles.
And so getting back into food security, we really try to implement all these partnerships, right? Every partnership we have. So right now we have the Inequity initiative where we're working on getting that bison into our school systems, into our more of our elders' plate, and replacing it with the food distribution program, who was really set here to sadly kill us off. And you'll see that with those inflated epidemiology statistics. I mean, all across this nation, like LJ said, you'll see that you can go into your own family history and just look at the of where it really began.
Well, thanks for sharing, everyone. I think that kind of just, it's kind of great. I feel like this whole conversation has just naturally led to the next question, and on. But that being said, officially, the next question that we have is, what changes have tribal communities seen in the past several decades due to climate change, and especially how does cultural perspective change tribes' response to global warming? And we'll go to Mike to start us out on that one. Oh, I did also want to just point out, as we all, I don't know who all attended, but we had a great talk last night from Aubrey Gordon on anti-fat bias, and just wanted to note that, body size might not be the greatest indicator of things, health stuff, that's a good thing to point out. But yeah, just wanted to point that out. But as far as the question on how tribes react to climate change, let's go to Mike.
Thanks, Destiny, and thanks, Tremaine. So we were one of the first tribes in the United States to develop a climate strategy. We chose to call it a strategy because at the time I felt like all the workshops that were going on were basically helping tribes build adaptation plans. And I did a workshop down in Santa Ana Pueblos, and one of the elder ladies said, "You know what, Mike? I'm sick and tired of having to adapt to all this bullshit that these people are doing to us, you know. I don't, you know, and that's how we feel sometimes, you know, we have to adapt to all this stuff that's going on around us. So I chose to call our plans a strategy because it's not all about adaptation, and there's some mitigation that we can do, right? So when we developed our plan, white bark pine came higher up on our priority list. White bark pine, if you don't know, is a high elevation, slow growing tree. We are historically a timber resource tribe, so a lot of our revenues come from timber sales. Historically, white bark pine is not really a merchantable tree because it grows so slow and so high. If you look at some of the pictures, you'll see how gnarly those trees are. However, in doing so, we learned I didn't know that white bark pine nuts historically was a food source for us, which we haven't had for a long time. And so we would like, 2 years ago, in fact, the forestry program planted 3,000 trees up in the South Fork of the Jocko after a fire had went through the previous year. That's the best place to plant them. So that was the first time in our history that they ever planted these white bark pine trees. And it takes them about 70 to 80 years to grow big enough to start growing their own cones. The cones that they have are clear at the top of the tree. And our elders had told us that, and it's not like, you know, pinyon pine in the Southwest. These white bark pine seeds, which are consumed by over 100 different animal species, including us, provide a high level of protein and fat. So the grizzly bears love them, Clark's nutcrackers, squirrels, black bears. So there's like 100 different animals that rely on those seeds. I shared a video that I was going to show you guys, but this is not that kind of a venue. So Destiny, you can put that in the chat or whatever, you can share it. Right now I'm working on a video series, a VR series, virtual reality series around white bark pine and the Clark's nutcracker. So that series, it's going to be a series of 7 videos, and I'm putting together a curriculum to go along with it so that people learn about the cultural significance of the tree and the seeds and all the different animals and the climate impacts. So you're learning about Western science, one thing, about the phenology, about what is killing them, the pine beetles and the blister rust, and what kind of a role do we play in, you know, bringing them back or saving them. What's going to happen, you know, when, I mean, the trees that they planted in the South Fork, I won't be around to see those when they get mature enough to have their own seeds. And the nutcracker is the one that disperses all those seeds around. So all the trees rely on the nutcracker, the bird, to help disperse the seeds. But when all the different impacts are happening, global or climate change, wildfires, intense wildfires, huge, like, you know, LJ was talking about. I mean, we had that up here on the reservation last year, up in Boulder, up on the east side of Flathead Lake. That's one of the areas that it's kind of a study area for white bark pine for us, where Salish Community College and forestry has been going up there. They have to find what they call plus trees. So those plus trees remind me of us, because they're resilient, they've survived, and trying to find those trees is sometimes difficult, to find a healthy tree amongst a whole bunch of unhealthy ones. So that series will start with me talking about the plan and the development of the plan, and then we're gonna get on the Nutcracker Express. Well, you guys can watch the video, I don't have to tell you. Anyway, we have the Nutcracker Express. We're gonna go down to the Longhouse and listen to the Salish Kalispel elders talk about the cultural significance. So you're gonna fly in and sit with the elders, so it'll be like you're sitting right there with them. That's why it's virtual. And then from there, we're going to fly up to Elmo, and you can listen to the Kootenai elders talk about the cultural significance. Then we'll fly up to Boulder, learn about climate change, learn about phenology, learn about the importance and significance of the trees. And we're going to fly down to the greenhouse where they're now growing about 30,000 little white bark pine babies. And then we're going to fly to Three Lakes Peaks, where you'll meet my Adlawia. My Adlawia, I named this tree and I would share it with you, but it's not on my screen. It's a huge tree. It's a dead tree, but we think it's around maybe 2,000 years old. I mean, it's huge. And Adlawia in my language means my great grandparent. And when we brought the kids up there, I was telling them, you know, this tree's about, we think it's about 2,000 years old. What was going on 2,000 years ago here? And I said, if this tree could tell a story, what story would it tell? And then I said, it does actually. If we did a core sample, it would tell us when there was good water years, drought years, fire years. So they all tell us a story. And you're right. I mean, the rock is alive. The tree is alive. It does have a spirit. So after I bought a GoPro 360 that I'm going to put on a zip line from the top of one of those trees, and it'll zip down to like it'll be like a Clark's nutcracker. So you'll go into cache the seed. Finally, we're going to end up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho, where they're doing genetic testing. The Forest Service has a big greenhouse over there. And we've been working with them. We've been providing some seed sources and some baby trees for other people around. And hopefully, yes, Tremaine, we could work together, because what I'd really like to do, because I'm part of the National White Bark Pine Restoration effort, I think you guys are too, is for the nutcracker to eventually fly up to Browning and sit with the Blackfeet elders, and then over to Coeur d'Alene and sit with the Coeur d'Alenes and the Nez Perce, and there's like 7 or 8 tribes that we are what we've identified in the Northwest that has white bark pine habitat. So I'd really like to, you know, expand that VR series to listen to the elders up there in the Nez Perce and the Coeur d'Alene. And so, yeah, that's our
And part of that, I just found out about that we have 5 plots here on the Blackfeet Nation, but the Blackfeet tribe is not housing any of the data. We're not having any part of the project. And why? Like, these are one of our traditional cultural plants. And we lost some of that to climate change because we lost our elders, right? And so we're losing these stories. And so digging and researching, I found that, you know, we have this, and I'm like, oh, we need to jump on board there, Mike.
Hop on the Nutcracker Express.
Yep.
Anyway, that's the other thing I'm working on is a children's book around white bark pine and Clark's nutcracker. So you'll see that coming out. It's going to be on all 3 languages, English, Salish, and Kootenai. So it'll be a virtual book. You open it up, you learn about, you can click on somebody, not me. I'm trying to get younger people to do this. So you'll click on Kieran, and Kieran's going to read to you in English. You'll click on Jim, and Jim's going to read to you in Salish. And you'll click on Tony or Vernon or whoever, and they'll read it to you in Kootenai.
Maybe that could be a good way to mobilize some of the language programs at SKC and have some of those young readers read for you.
Yeah, I'm working with Cheney Bell down at Salish, Vernon Finley up at Kootenai, and yeah, that could be something else we do, Tremaine, eventually. Yeah, well, that's all. Watch the video, pretty cool. There's another one on I think PBS called Ghost Forest. Have you seen that, Tremaine? Yeah, we're in that, or I'm in a very little part of that in the end, and you'll see my Adlawia.
Yeah, I think I saw Sheena Shaw.
Yeah, Sheena Shaw's up there. Yeah. Anyway,
That's great to hear, Mike. Sounds like you're doing a lot of good work, and yeah, I'll be excited to see that series. So will you be posting those all to your YouTube channel? Should we subscribe to it?
yeah.
Yep, all right.
Anybody can go on to our website. We developed a website, so it's csktclimate.org.
Okay,
Or email me personally, and I'll make sure you get it.
all right. Sounds good.
You know,
Uh,
I just want to say one more thing, because it's about, you know, the changes that we've seen. And Destiny, you shared earlier about when you were a child and looking at Glacier National Park and the glaciers and the changes in the white on the mountains, right? When I was a child or young man, I was sitting with my grandfather in behind the house. I remember we was looking up at the mountains, and he said, "Mike, you see that glacier right up there?" He said, "If that glacier ever melts, there's gold under there." And I'm like, "Oh yeah, right." As if that glacier is ever going to melt. Well, here we are. And I'm too fat and too old to hike up there to see if there's any gold up there. But that's, you know, that's just something that we've observed in our lifetime. And, you know, they're expecting all of the glaciers in Glacier National Park to be totally gone in the next 25 years.
We're already 85% gone. You
Right.
can look up at the naked eye and you can actually hike up, and it's crazy.
Yeah.
And so, part of the way, sorry, Mike, I didn't know if you're finished, but
Just one little, I talk about, you know, we live in God's country. It's really hard when you're driving through the Mission Valley, the Swan Valley, or up. I mean, you know, you're kind of isolated up there, Tremaine, but it's beautiful country. And it's really hard for some people to say, climate change, that's not even whatever. And I tell them, hey, you know, you drive up Highway 93 and you look up on the mountains, all those dead trees, that's an impact. And that's impacting us on a very large scale, because those trees help retain snowpack, and those trees stop or slow down the melt off in the spring. If the water's coming out of there like you know, as it has in the past, you know, I don't know how many years, it comes out within 2-week period.
Yep.
All of a sudden in April, we're at 70 or 80 degrees. And then here it comes. So that causes a lot of erosion, caused a lot of pollution. So we're having some dirty water instead of coming out slow and clean. Okay, I'm off.
So kind of jumping back to his question, so how does cultural perspective change tribes' response to global warming? So the way we looked at, the way we implemented our culture into our projects is we used the Beaver Mimicry Project, which was nationwide or statewide watershed stewardship award that we got for the coordination of all the amazing partnerships that we had on the Blackfeet Nation. So we had the BCC Native American Science Fellows, we had the high school horticulture class and their STEM students, middle school STEM students, Cutswood, our immersion private school language. We had their science class, and then we had the BCC Native American Science Fellows, and then we had Fish and Game, Blackfeet Environmental, and Water Quality Resources. So we really put into a joint partnership on how we can combat climate change. And so we looked at implementing our adaptation plan. So we were just, Mike just gave us the brilliant idea and we just ran with it. I was an intern starting then, and I am now serve as the climate change coordinator. And so with that, I really got to see the plan from start to finish, actually sitting sitting in the meetings, following these natural resource directors around and just screaming, hey, how are we going to fight this? How are we going to protect the future of our people? And so the first implementation was the water sector. And so with the water sector came the Beaver Project. And so the Beaver Project looks at naturally storing water. And so just like Mike was saying, you know, we're seeing, like Destiny was saying, we're seeing all the snowpack diminish. And so with that, we thought, you know, we need to act. So we need to recharge this ground. We're losing ground. We're in a drought. We've been in a drought. We can see the naked eye. We can see we're not getting as much fish out of our waters. We're seeing our waters, you know, the habitat changing. So we're seeing no fish, warm water, and we're seeing a lot, really low flows, summer late flows that are just dried up, where you can like literally walk across some of these watersheds. And that is scary, because at my time and when I was a kid, you could swim in the creek all day long and nothing, you know, and now it's like you have to go find a different spot for you to even go under. And so that's scary. And so we, like I said, we got this partnership going, and we really come together with our students and our youth in mind to really take hold of this and run with it. And that is what we done. And it opened, I mean, this project's so broad. We brought in our traditionalists, we brought in our beaver bundles. You know, the beaver is one of our most sacred animals to Blackfeet Nation, to our people. And so we brought in our traditional ties, our ceremonies. We had our cultural preservation officer, John Murray, who's also a traditional beaver bundle owner, come in and actually pass these songs on to these students who are of Blackfeet descent. And they were given these songs, they were given the ways that we care for our beaver and how we respond. And that, I believe, that is one of the reasons why we are continuing to see this project thrive, is because we took those measures and we really reached out from the bottom up, and the bottom up is from the youth to the elders. That's all.
Tell John to jump on board with the white bark pine stuff.
I know, I'm trying to get him. So it's not John, it's not John Gillum, it's Mike Hoyt now. So he's the new forestry.
Send me his email, will you?
I will.
I think we should get together.
We should. We need a meeting, Mike.
Yep. Cool.
Thanks, Tremaine. I feel like I learned a lot there just listening. LJ and Angeline, I know that Angeline, you already spoke in the beginning kind of about some things that you were seeing, but yeah, if you have anything to add, great.
No comment. I know that we have time and stuff to get through.
Yeah, similarly, I mean, I just wanted to echo the sentiment of there's so much that we can learn from you know, the spiritual nature of the animals that we are in environment and we're in community with. And when we start to pay attention, when we take a really mindful step and recognize I guess the place of humanity, not at the center of the circle, but within the circle, we can really start to make difference.
I like that. That's a good point.
Speaking of circles, so if you go to our website, you'll see that we're working on basically rewriting our plan, our strategy based on the new models and the new science that's telling us that everything we predicted was going to happen 40 years from now, back in 2012, is happening now. So we're rewriting that plan, and part of that process, I had what I call my awake vision, and I've seen that, what you're talking about, LJ. So in my vision, I woke up like, I don't know, 3 o'clock in the morning, and behind my house, so I live between Ronan and St. Ignatius, so right up behind my house is McDonald Peak and all that. On top of that peak, I seen a pika. If you don't know what a pika is, it's a small, cute little rodent that lives at the top of the mountain, and they rely on cold and high elevation. And that it was the last pika, and that pika died. And when that pika died, there was a deer behind my house in the meadow, and that deer lifted her head up because she knew that something just happened. She wasn't sure. She didn't know that that was the last pika, but she knew that something in a sacred circle just changed. And we as human beings, for, you know, what I've been telling people is we need to reconnect ourselves into that sacred circle. We're a part of it. We're not outside of it. We're not over it. We're not under it, whatever. We're a part of it. And when things happen in that sacred circle, whether we take something out, like the pika or the grizzly bear or the bison or whatever it is, or even an insect, we think that that's no big deal, but it is. The ripple effect of that insect extinction is felt by all in the circle. That same thing happens when we put something back in the circle. It takes sometimes over 100 years for the circle to mend itself and readjust to that occurrence that just happened. So that's you can see that in the plan. So it's something that LJ, you just kind of triggered in my thought, thinking about the circle and how we are part of that circle and we're connected to it. That's what we need to teach all of them out there. And then things will change.
And that kind of just jumps right into the next question too, as well, right, Destiny? So what are we seeing? So as me, I'm a cultural youth mentor, I'm a gatherer, I'm a mom, I'm an auntie, I'm a sister, I'm a teacher. And so I teach my children everything I learned from the moment they can speak on up, right? And so my daughter's 10, and so she learned how to gather, and so she's a gatherer now. And what we're seeing is in our day-to-day lives is the medicinal properties. So I think Angeline said it as well too, that that this climate change is hindering our medicinal properties. We're seeing our sages, our sweetgrasses are not as prominent. So, and that's a hindrance to our circle. That's a hindrance to us as who we are as Nitsitapi, as Indigenous people, people of the land, right? And so we were here, I believe we were put on this earth and to be stewards, to take care. And so as a Blackfeet woman, we're part of these different roles and societies, and we move forward and throughout life. And so in my short 33 years, I experienced a lot, and I seen a lot, and believe I have the privilege to speak when I speak for my elders, and that it's scarce. It's scarce out there. You're not going to go to your favorite berry picking spot anymore. You're going to have to find a whole new spot. You're going to, the cattle, the open range, everything has a prominent role in our circle. And keeping everything in balance is what we're trying to do. And climate change has just caused an abundance of chaos in that. And so I try to teach from a societal point of view. So like our beaver bundles are subculture, a sub-seasonal bundle, and its operational functions teach us how to steward the land throughout life, from the calendar to what we gather to how we gather. And so really getting back to who we are as Indigenous people is key to stewarding, to being great land stewards and teaching our non-Indigenous neighbor.
Yeah, thanks for Tremaine. I want to see if anybody has any short responses before we move into our final statements? Got nothing? All right. Well, Tremaine, that was a pretty great talk you just gave there. Would you like to add anything to that as your final statement?
No, I just think if anybody, if anybody wants to get on board, like you just seen me and Mike have just, just that 2-minute connection, just by reaching out and saying, hey, what are you doing? Looking over that mountain. And I know we wouldn't be in the position we are at if we hadn't looked to Mike. And so that is just, linking back up that full circle and getting back to our life.
And you know what's awesome, Tremaine, is that circle is getting bigger.
It is.
When I first
Finally a
started out,
conversation now, right?
when I started out in 2011, 2012, the circle was pretty small, especially with indigenous folks, indigenous people. Now that circle has grown tremendously, and it's really awesome to see. I'm not 32 anymore, but yeah, it is awesome. There's just one other thing that I want to share with you, and this is on our website too. And this is something that I think, Tremaine, I've been up there a couple of times to talk with some of the kids in the school about the Eagles program.
Oh, yeah.
So when I think we finalized our first plan in 2013, and I think it was 2015, when my brother and I had this idea, and we had this thought about how do we get the youth more involved in what we're doing in climate change work. And so we came up with the EAGLES program. It's Environmental Advocates for Global and Local Ecological Sustainability, EAGLES. And we just, I put in for a BIA Youth Resilience Grant and got it, and basically come up with some ideas. All of that information is on our website. If you want to know anything about it, let me know. But we started out with some ideas about recycling, community gardens, teaching them how to preserve and plant foods and all that stuff. But when I went to the schools, I really said, and this happens all the time, right? Adults come to the kids and say, we want you to do this. But I told them, I have some money and I have some ideas, but I want you to own this. I want this to be yours. So the schools, some of the schools went crazy. They went and did assessments in the classrooms, and I bought all kinds of recycle bins. I bought some enclosed utility trailers so that the kids could put all the recycles in there. And I think 3 of the schools, since we started that program, almost every year have won awards it's called the Montana State Smart School Challenge. So it's pretty awesome. And we wanted to make that I wanted to make it a regional event with the Eagle Summit, a national event, and an international event, because at one point the kids were actually Skyping with Samis. So I want to start that back up. And I was supposed to go to Mongolia this summer. Tremaine, do you want to go to Mongolia to do some climate work? It's like 28 days in Mongolia, going to different villages and doing basic, climate workshops in those villages. I don't know if I can do it now. It's a long, long flight, 26 hours, I think. Ask Gerald if he wants to go to Mongolia.
Oh, he'll be down to go somewhere. So with our youth as well, trying just to stay on that motivation of getting our plan implemented every step of the way. We are into the 3rd goal of the water sector, and we're actually snow fencing. So we are working with the high school horticulture class, and they're actually having a snow lab. So they're really combating climate change and capitalizing what we have left. And so we have 3 snow fences, 150 feet long. The first one is the the high school students are just testing the designs, and the Native American Science Fellows, they're actually preserving their wetlands. So they're really taking next steps and getting creative with their funding and getting creative with these partnerships and how we can just keep going and implementing, because I took this role on and I refuse for the Blackfeet Climate Adaptation Plan to be just another plan. We're going to implement one thing out of each sector as long as I'm here.
Great sentiment to end on there. Thank you for sharing. LJ, do you have any last statements?
Yeah, I guess a final statement for me would be, you know, with the previous wildfire seasons that we've had, and just with noticing the weather patterns and animal extinction and migration, it's not really hard to understand that climate change is here and that it's real. And then I think that if folks can start to recognize that the healthier that the environment and the healthier that your neighbors are, the healthier you are. So start coming into the conversation about environmental justice, and let's start doing work, actionable items as far as improving the lives of our neighbors, of the animals, of the environment, and in doing so, bolstering your own life as well. A place where everybody can come into contact with is in legislation and politics. Let's stop voting for people who do not have a comprehensive awareness of climate change and how to take action. Thank you all. I'll see you again.
Thank you for that. Well, Angeline, do you have any closing words for us?
Yeah, I really agree with everybody. And I think that we do need to start working together. I do know that like when KXL was crossing through, I was like, where's all the Blackfeet? Because we sit here on the 1855 Blackfeet Treaty. And that's the common hunting grounds. And the KXL pipeline, the route of it was going to be going through. But we did get a few people though from Blackfeet territory to come and attend some meetings. And then we finally started to have like group meetings and stuff like that. But I think that it's really good to have like an action plan or a strategy to think about the future generations, and that, you know, leads to allyship too. Like even the legislators like coming up with bills to protect these waters. And I think it was Steve Daines that was kind of a little bit pissed off because he wanted to protect just all the rivers, you know, except for when it comes to the Missouri River. It's you know, he wanted to put up that bill to protect those waters, and which left us out, the Missouri River. So I know that Frank Smith set up a bill, but it didn't get passed. But that's the thing though, is that we need all the people that are on here from Montana. Indigenous people need to be at the table. If there's an opportunity or a chance, take it and grab it and run with it, because we need people on the school boards. We need people in office, you know, to make these decisions for us, you know. I mean, it's good and all that we have like House representatives and, you know, stuff like that, but it would be good to see an Indigenous person on there. And that's what we need to support. It doesn't matter what tribe or anything like that. And I just think that Indigenous people belong at the table. You know, we belong front and center. I got invited to this MMIW event. They had all of us natives in the back. I was like, I'm not standing in the back. So I went up to the front podium and I said, you know, I belong here front and center. I said, you know, you listen to me and listen to our issues, you know, and I wanted DOJ, the MMIW task force team to do something about these issues. They knew about these increased crime rates around the oil fields. But when KXL was coming, we never heard from them. We never heard, you know, their issues and stuff like that. They didn't want to tell us anything. We had to find out on our own and do our own research, you know. But that's why I believe Indigenous people, we're the original caretakers of this land, and it's going to take our cultural practices and our ceremonies we have the power, Indigenous people, to actually turn climate change around. because we do have all the answers. We have medicine people, we have all of that. But, you know, we have to run with those opportunities. And that's where I wanted to leave with a quote. And the struggle belongs to all of us. The fight for the land and the water for future generations, Chief Leonard Kodog. And then what I take from that is that the struggle belongs to all of us. It doesn't matter what nation or what color you are, it belongs to all of us. And we're all impacted by this climate inequity. And thank you, everybody. And thanks for the ones for taking the time out of your day to listen. So Valentine's Day is coming up. If any, I'm that main auntie. I've been getting all those fry breads rounded up. They've been delivering and all of that. Anyway, I just had to add our Indian humor.
Good one.
Thanks, Ange. Thank you so much. Thank you all. I'm really grateful to all of our panelists. You all had great things to say. I hardly had to do anything. We didn't get to talk much about low income focus today, but you know, this is all ongoing. It's not just going to get solved right here. But hopefully people can take this and learn from it. I'm going to put a link to a movie that I like in the chat, just because I think it's a good way to learn about some of these, how climate change affects Indigenous people and also low income people disproportionately. Also, just wanted to mention that if you wanted to continue the conversation, you can join the WPLI Slack. We'll have open conversation there. If you have a question that you want to ask directly, you can email me at Destiny. That's Destiny with an I, DESTINI at montanawomenvote.org. And I'll get back to you as soon as I can. We also have an evaluation form. If you want to fill that out, I think it'll be, the link will be in the chat. If you fill that out and put your name at the bottom, you'll be entered to win either a gift card or a copy of Aubrey Gordon's book, What We Don't Talk About When We Talk About Fat. Aubrey Gordon is our keynote speaker for this event, and she gave a really great talk tomorrow. If you heard it, then you know what I'm talking about. Wow, did I say she gave a great talk tomorrow? She gave a great talk yesterday. And yeah, if you heard it, you know what I'm saying. And if you didn't hear it, then you should read this book because she's really funny and insightful. We'll have a full recording of this up on our website as soon as it can be processed. And thank everybody for attending. And oh, I should mention, I almost forgot. So tomorrow we're having 2 skills labs. The first one will start at, oh my gosh, hold on. Does it start at, 1 second, let me just check this out. I should have been prepared for this. So the first one will start at 2 o'clock, and that's the how to run for office. And we will have some political officials teaching that, people who have been elected. And the second one is independent journalism, telling your story through independent journalism. I'll actually be facilitating that with my coworker Devi, and that starts at 3 o'clock. Once again, I just want to say thank you to our panelists. This was a really great discussion, and I'm glad to be here and be a part of it. Y'all have a good day. See ya.
Thank you.
To see ya.
Thanks, bye.
Thank you.